It's really sad to watch people on YouTube making complete fools of themselves just because they desperately want to believe in gods. They just have no good reason to do so. So they engage in fallacious thinking, bald assertions, and blind faith, and that just isn't going to go over as well today as it did in the distant past. So let's watch an Irish take on the same question, because they're no better than anyone else. So today we're going to take a look at an Irish YouTuber, and forgive me if I don't even try to pronounce the name of the channel because I'd probably just get it wrong. This is, no surprise, yet another theist with their comment section turned off because they're absolutely terrified of being proven a fool once the rational people actually arrive. And that's no surprise at all. So let's see what this Irish lad has to say and why this is just not how intelligent people operate. Hope you enjoy, because this is kind of dumb.
Hello, welcome back to the channel. It's me, Seamus, here with you again with another video. Today is a big one, however, because today we're going to be looking and seeing if there's actually any proof for the existence of God.
And the answer to that is no. Now, I know that a lot of theists play really fast and loose with their terminology, so I'm going to start off by clarifying exactly what I mean when I refer to proof and evidence and all of that. So let's start off with proof. While there is no real proof of anything outside of mathematics and alcohol, we'll go with evidence or argument establishing or helping to establish a fact or the truth of a statement. In other words, it has to be something objective that can be checked out and verified as factually correct by people who do not necessarily have an attachment to the conclusion whatsoever. Similarly, the definition of evidence that I'm going to go with is the available body of facts or information indicating whether a belief or proposition is true or valid. And keep in mind, truth and validity matter. You actually have to be able to prove that the thing that you're talking about is actually true. Now, some of the things that do not qualify at all are things like faith, your book, your wishful thinking, or your bald rationalizations. And unfortunately for the religious, that's about all they've actually got. So let's get back to the video and see how well he does producing anything that I would consider proof or evidence. I wouldn't be holding my breath.
Now, when I visit schools, I ask people a lot if they believe in God or if they don't. And for the people that don't, the main reason they give is that there is no proof. Now, in this video, I am going to attempt to give you some proof that you may not be aware of.
Yeah, that's not going to work out very well for you, is it? This is exactly where the religious go entirely off the rails because they're not actually talking about proof. They're talking about rationalization. They have a goal in mind up front, and they're going to wave their arms around and play make-believe so that they can reach their preconceived conclusion because that's what strokes their egos. This is not going to fly, I'll tell you that right now. And the reason it won't fly is because the religious won't accept the exact same tactics from any other religious believer. They're all doing the exact same thing, which is why you will see the same old tired philosophical argument coming out of multiple religions, and then they'll all claim, well, see, that proves my God. No, it doesn't actually prove anything. And if a Christian can look at a Muslim who is saying the same thing that the Christian does and not accept the Muslim's conclusion, then guess what? It goes the other way too. You're not talking about proof. You're talking about fantasy. But yeah, go ahead, because this should be good for a laugh.
However, and I must stress this, that when you're dealing with a subject as difficult or as big as like the existence of God, we can get lost down a lot of different philosophies and we can argue over so many different things, including like what is proof.
But that's something that you need to establish right up front, just like I did. It's not a rabbit hole, it's a basic part of honest discussion, and you notice that the religious don't do that a lot, do they? Because their ideas are simply not rationally defensible whatsoever. It's why these discussions never go anywhere useful, because the religious, they are starting, as I said, with a conclusion reached for emotional reasons, and then they just expect everyone else to fall into line at the ridiculous nature of their bald rationalizations. So let's get it out of the way right now. Your rationalizations are not impressive. I don't care about the crazy crap that you can run through in your head and come up with a conclusion that you wanted to all along. Your emotional claims are not valid. If you are presenting anything but what I described at the beginning of this video, you've lost. So let's see how well he does.
If you do like to get into the nitty-gritty of complex arguments for the existence of God, then I know a few people that make a great, if complicated, argument for God's existence.
No, honestly they don't. Because they're doing effectively the same thing as everyone else. They might use bigger words, but they're not presenting any better evidence. And this goes whether you're talking about William Lane Craig, or Frank Turek, or some religious idiot on the internet. Actually, none of them are presenting any evidence at all, which makes their claims utterly pointless, and that's why I'm still looking for someone who isn't the most absurd, lowest common denominator debater out there. Maybe someday, but I'm just not holding my breath. It would be fun to see who he thinks is presenting complex arguments for the existence of God, because if he says something like William Lane Craig, I'm going to laugh.
And I'll give you a list of those people in the description below.
Well, what do you know? Now, I know this is going to derail things a little, but since he brought it up, let's go take a look at who he's impressed with. I promise it won't take that long. So he says C.S. Lewis, which I've addressed before, and he's absolutely nothing to write home about. He wrote the same old tired apologetic books over and over and over again, and none of it stands up to a moment's critical scrutiny. He's the guy that came up with the stupid liar, lunatic, lord stuff, and then he completely forgot about legend. You know, basic common sense. Then, as expected, he suggests William Lane Craig, and he's one of those people with a big mouth and a tiny brain. All of his claims are just claims, just like everything else the religious do, and we've taken them apart time and time and time again. He's got nothing but a fawning audience, and he refuses to talk to people who he doesn't think he can beat. He's just not that impressive, I'm sorry. And finally, he lists John Lennox, which I've taken apart thoroughly, and he's just a joke. Zero evidence, and you can find the videos that I've done of him, which shows that he's just a lying con man. He isn't after the truth. He just wants emotional comfort, and he's perfectly willing to lie through his teeth to find it. So if this is the best that you can do, and I know that it is because there just isn't anybody else, if this is the best, you're toast.
However, in this video, myself and yourself, we're going to look at something called the cosmological argument.
Which is complete and total bullshit. Now, I know that we've done this before, but it isn't like the religious ever come up with anything new or interesting or any intelligent or rational arguments or anything. So I'm going to attempt to do my best to explain exactly why it fails so utterly. So I'm going to let him get on with his explanation, and then I'm going to tear it all down. This ought to be fun.
I think it's a great place to start because you get to use the word cosmological, which immediately makes you feel about, 15% smarter. Cosmological has to do with the cosmos, which is just another word for the universe. The idea is that the existence of the universe is actually evidence for the existence of God.
And that's where you're going wrong right up front. It's nothing of the sort, and I'll show you why. Remember, these are people starting out with an emotionally comforting conclusion and then desperately trying to get back to it with cherry-picked data points and a whole bunch of wishful thinking. And we'll see exactly that as we go on.
Now, scientists generally agree that the universe began about 13.6 billion years ago with the Big Bang. What's interesting to note though is this whole theory of the Big Bang actually began with a Catholic priest called Georges Lemaitre.
And that's entirely irrelevant. Just like the picture of him with Einstein doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is the data that you can present. All the rest of it is just emotional fluff. This is just a religious tactic to try to build up their assumed hero when nothing else could be further from the truth. Yes, he was a Catholic priest, but so what? That doesn't prove anything about the religion other than the fact that he could set aside his religious beliefs for a couple of minutes and do some actual science. To his credit, that's a hard thing for a lot of theists to do, so at least he got that right. This goes right back to a mistake that a lot of theists make, the idea that a degree or a couple of letters after your name automatically makes you credible. What makes you credible when it comes to the science is the science that you do. It's not the classes you sat in, it's not the books that you read. It's whether the things that you are saying, the things that are coming out of your mouth right now, whether that corresponds to the best known, most accepted, best defended ideas that science currently has to offer. So let's boot that one out right now.
The reason I think that's important to know is that a lot of people think that the Big Bang is like evidence against God, whereas it was first theorized by a priest who firmly believed in the existence of God. And a lot of other scientific discoveries about our universe were made by priests and other clergymen.
Again, so what? Of course, this is just an assumption, a common one at that the religious can't do anything that isn't religious in nature. I mean, they don't want to take credit for the Catholic priests that are out there raping little kids, do they? Can we just say, keep in mind that these are people who firmly believe in the existence of God? Yeah, they're not going to accept that, any more than we should accept the validity of Lemaitre's religious beliefs. Science is science. Religion is religion. They don't cross over very much. You either do it right or you don't. And in the end, nothing else matters.
So how can the universe be evidence for God? Well, the fact that it has a beginning, for one.
And that's something that you just haven't established, because the Big Bang was the moment of expansion of the universe. It doesn't say anything at all about what might have come before it, mostly because in the absence of time, that's not really a statement that makes any kind of sense. The religious just assume that there was absolutely nothing, and then bang, there was everything, and that's just not how it works. You actually have to go back to the science, and keep in mind, there are actually multiple ideas on how the Big Bang actually worked. This is not something you can just go, well, here's the common understanding that I think my audience will have, therefore we're just going to appeal to it. Not all of the cosmological models for the Big Bang require that there was nothing present preceding it. But, like I said, the religious are just cherry-picking for a reason, and that's why they only look at the models that they can twist to agree with them. The only thing the Big Bang tells us is that our instantiation of the physical universe expanded out of a quantum fluctuation. That's it. Everything else is pure guesswork.
So if everything we know, everything that was, and everything that will be had an origin in the Big Bang, that begs the question, what started the Big Bang?
Now, I suppose I have to give him credit here because he didn't ask, well, who started the Big Bang? Like a lot of other apologists do, but that's not really a better question to ask. Words and concepts matter. We can look at how the Big Bang started, but we can't rationally look for a cause, in the sense that there being an entity or a creator or anything else that done it. Like I said before, the religious are trying desperately to get to their pre-existing beliefs, and as such, throw in a lot of baggage into their assertions. Baggage that cannot be demonstrated in any way, shape, or form. And I'm sure that's where this guy is going, straight to an assertion that, my God done it. But he can't demonstrate that, and that's where all of the cosmological arguments fall apart entirely. It's just an assertion, not a demonstrated fact. I'm only interested in something that you can demonstrate is an actual fact, whereas they just don't care. It's why, in all of these supposed arguments, they just reach a certain point and then they just go gallivanting down the primrose path toward, therefore, God. And I'm sorry, but it just doesn't work that way. You actually have to prove it, and they are universally terrible at that.
Common experience and scientific evidence both verify that something can't come from nothing. Being can't come from non-being.
Ah yes, the fallacious appeal to common sense. This is on top of all the other fallacious appeals that the religious utilize. Just because you don't understand something, that doesn't mean that you just get to say, well, God did it. You actually have to show that it happened that way, and these people don't even try. Because here's the thing. He and others like him are trying to apply systems that work within our particular universe to things that happened before our universe existed. Ultimately, it's a giant appeal to ignorance. I don't know how these things might have happened, so I'm going to just assume that whatever I know right now, that must have been how things always were. Yeah, says who? And then all of their arguments hinge on our physical laws, the ones in force right this second in our universe, being true forever and ever and ever, and there's absolutely no way to demonstrate that. Once you take away that assumption, everything else collapses. Remember, the only reason they're arguing at all is to try and funnel everything to the belief that they started out with. It's never to find the demonstrable truth because they just don't care. It's all about maintaining their emotional comfort, and that's just sad.
If something like the Big Bang comes into being from nothing, then it's kind of inexplicable why everything doesn't just come into being from nothing. Why is it only universes? Why don't elephants just appear or tables just appear?
Yeah, except quantum particles do just appear, at least based on the best modern scholarship. Remember, the origin of the universe was at the quantum level, a quantum scalar field according to one hypothesis. This is just ignorance at play, and there's a whole lot of ignorance in the religious way of thinking, and honestly, I have to use that word very, very loosely. They aren't concerned about coming up with a rational, evidence-based, objectively factual conclusion. They just want to have their fifis coddled. That's what this is all about, getting their emotions caressed so that they're in a constant state of bliss. And that's just childish. It really is. Knock it off.
Also, there's the question of why is there something rather than nothing? There doesn't need to be anything. It's much easier for nothing to go on existing rather than something happening.
But again, that's not a valid question, because why implies purpose, and that's exactly what the religious are trying to get at. How is a valid thing to ask, but why is not. There's no reason to think that there is a why, and if you want to ask why, first you need to show that that's a valid question. Why are you here? Well, factually speaking, it's because your parents fucked. That's the how, and that's a question that we can actually answer. But why did that specific egg join with that specific sperm and then survive through to birth? There's no larger reason to that we can tell. It just happened to happen that way. There is no larger purpose to it. Welcome to basic biochemistry. But the religious, they don't like that because the religious are looking for comfort. They're not looking for reality. Well, too bad. Reality is what you get, whether you like it or not. Do try to grow the hell up.
Time, space, and matter, or things, they all originated in the Big Bang. So whatever caused the Big Bang to be cannot be confined by time or space or matter.
Says who? I mean, really, it might not be confined by our time, space, and matter, but that doesn't mean that it's beyond any time, space, and matter, does it? Because here's the thing. Without time, nothing happens. Nothing can be created in the absence of time by definition. nothing can happen without matter. And I know the Bible says that God just zippity-doo-dah'd the universe out of nothing, but that's just fucking nonsense. That's a belief based on a very primitive understanding of reality that we certainly know better than today. Now, of course, that relies on whatever physical laws that existed at the time that the Big Bang occurred being reasonably like ours, and we can't actually prove that, but for the sake of argument and understanding, the analogy still works. This is all stuff that people just made up because it made them feel good. They have no way at all to prove any of it ever happened.
God, as a supernatural being or a more than natural being, fits this criteria.
Prove it. I mean, how do you know that God is supernatural? How do you know that there's any such thing as the supernatural in the first place? Because that's just a claim that you read about in a book, and the religious have never actually done anything to demonstrate that it's actually factually correct. In fact, they can't even define what the supernatural is. They can only speak about it in terms of what it isn't. It's not natural. It's different than natural. Different in what way? How do you know that? How do you prove that? You can't. How exactly have you tested your idea to see if it holds water? Because they haven't and they don't care. It's just a catch-all for their own ignorance. It's, I really like the idea, so I'm just going to run with it. But that's not how critical thinking works. This is just bald assertion ripped straight out of their asses, and I suspect we're going to see a lot of that coming up. Let's see if I'm right.
God is described as eternal, not confined by time. God is also described as being omnipresent, so not confined to a particular space. And God is also described as not being made of a thing or a material. The authors who wrote about God's supernatural nature were writing thousands of years before we had the theory of the Big Bang.
And they just made all of that stuff up. Because in order to take any of those claims seriously, you would have to show how your ancient writers came by that information intellectually, and unfortunately for you, you just can't. And this is where the religious run into so many problems, because all of this looks exactly as we'd expect from primitive goat herders who just didn't know any better. They were just trying to explain the world around them in the only way that they knew how, and all of it was complete bunk. It's like all the fucktards who still believe in a flat earth. They're just doing it because ancient people, and these people are almost all religious, remember, but ancient people thought that way. Well, guess what? We know better today. Figure it out. The religious would much rather cling to primitive mythology than to just deal with the actual world that we know about that's all around them today. And I'm not impressed by your claim about your God. I want you to show me objectively how you came to that conclusion and what evidence you have that supports it. And that would mean having to actually produce an actual God that we can observe to determine what characteristics actually apply. Because guess what? This is something I've said before, but guess what? You can't just redefine something real out of the blue. You actually have to be able to look at it and see what it's like. And you people can't do that. Nothing else will work, so by all means, go right ahead, trot your God out. We'll wait.
And they'd already given God the necessary attributes to be the one that caused the Big Bang. So if you are looking for proof of God's existence, the very fact that we exist may just be that.
It's absolutely nothing of the sort. This is why the non-religious are so completely unimpressed with the crap that the religious come up with. We're just looking at this nonsense and saying, you can't prove any of that, can you? And of course, we're right. The religious, they're just operating on faith. They're not concerned, but faith doesn't get you anywhere. Faith doesn't prove anything. Anybody can have faith in anything. The Muslims have faith in Allah. The Hindus have faith in Krishna. The Christians have faith in God. Prove any of that actually exists. Well, they can't do that because they don't actually care if it's demonstrably true, so long as they get that dopamine hit in the head from it. We do care. This isn't about feelings for us. It's about facts, and that's the one thing that the religious simply don't have. Facts. Evidence. They don't have anything that can actually support them. They just have a poor understanding of, well, everything, and an absurdly overactive emotional state, and they couldn't care less if any of it makes any kind of rational sense. Because why does that matter? It gets in the way of their fee-fees. They're just getting what they want to out of it after all, and that's just stupid and intellectually empty. Just like they are. And it's sad that they can't acknowledge that simple reality, isn't it? We can. I don't know why they can't.
We don't have to be here, and yet here we are. And asking questions like this led a lot of great minds to accept the existence of God.
And seeing all of the problems with your claims, that has led a lot more to reject it. You people are losing, and as time goes on and your song doesn't change, it's only going to get worse. Because even in Ireland, religion is starting to fall. 10% of the population is non-religious, and it's growing rapidly. It hasn't been as fast as in other countries. I mean, after all, the UK has less than 50% religious people at the moment, but it is growing. Give it another decade or so, and we'll see just how confident you people still are. Because every single one of these problems that I've pointed out, those are the things that will eventually spell the death knell of religion. People are getting better educated, and with that education comes the clarity to not only ask questions, and hard questions at that, but to recognize that the answers that the religious come up with are complete and utter bullshit. People are learning how to see the fallacies, and the religious mindset is chock full of them. It's really all they have. The second you learn to see it, their entire pantheon of beliefs starts to fall apart. It really can't do anything else. They're still living thousands of years in the past and have no way to come up to a modern understanding of the world. And they don't care. They really don't, and that's just sad. Yet I doubt that any theist that might watch this video will give their beliefs a second thought, even with all the problems that I've already pointed out. It's why discussions between the religious and the non-religious tend to go very poorly. We care, they don't. We want confirmation, they want faith. We want facts, they want fee-fees. There is never going to be a meeting of the minds because one side, unfortunately, just isn't using theirs. It's pure feelings, zero facts, and as the world continues to get smarter and better educated, there will be fewer and fewer people willing to buy into the religious mind poison. It's why, ultimately, they are losing. And isn't that a wonderful thing?